Kathryn. Welcome to the podcast. Super excited to chat with you today. It's been a long time coming, this one.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
So tell us a little bit, give my audience a little bit of a snapshot about, who you are. Catch us up to what you're doing today. You're very dynamic, professional. So talk to us.
All right. So I am a woman in construction. And I mentioned that proudly because we're recording the beginning of March and we're about to walk into what is known as Women in Construction Week. And that goes for the entire full week of the first full week of March. So knowing that about me, so I graduated college with a degree in construction and a degree in psychology. And the goal from there was to explore the construction industry from as many perspectives as possible, from ideally a firsthand perspective where I can and where I'm interested. And then I also have a strong passion for workforce development, and I wanted to take that into the context of the construction industry. So in the operational side, in terms of project management, I have been a superintendent, I've been a project manager for both a general contractor or a couple of general contractors, as well as a couple of subcontractors. I have also in the past year stepped into a role of business development, but by the time this episode airs, I'm really leaning into my passion for workforce development and also building out my brand, Space to Build.
That's very cool. That's a lot. You got a lot going on.
Yes. And March is a busy month for it all.
Yes, it sounds like it. Well, thank you for making the time in the big annual construction week to have a chat about this. So, tell me a little bit more about just going back to your studies, why psychology and construction?
So back in high school, my senior year, I took an AP psychology course. So it's basically an advanced placement course where it just gave us a broad idea of what psychology is. And I fell in love with the segment that focused on industrial organizational psychology. And that's things in like HR, training, recruitment, retention, workforce development, things along those lines. So I took that to heart and I was like, you know what, I want to explore that more in college. So I went for a psychology degree on top of the construction degree.
Hmm. Well, listen, it probably helps you to deal with all the different individuals and personalities in construction, which I hear are very challenging at times. I have a good friend of mine who's a woman in construction, and she always tells me interesting stories. So I'm kind of curious to hear from you. Like, what has been your most rewarding experience so far as a woman in construction, and what do you see as challenges or areas of improvements for the construction industry? Is it as hectic as they say it is?
It is never a dull moment in construction. So it's perfect for somebody who doesn't want to just deal with the day in, day out routine. I mean, there's structure to what we do, and there's different systems in place. But if you ask somebody to explain their day to day, they're going to look at you and kind of go, well, let me pick a day because every day is a little different. In terms of the personalities you work with, oh my goodness, it's a lot. It's all over the place, but it's really cool. So you'll get a lot of the stereotypical strong, dominant males in the field and in the office. And the beauty about what's going on right now in construction is that you're seeing a lot more diversity. There's more women in the workplace, especially in construction. And it's adding a different layer. Like there's new things to talk about. There's new shifts in communication and priorities as an employee.
Mm. And is that something like what has caused these shifts?
It's the women and other people, like everybody in the industry is starting to see the impact of the labor shortage right now.
Hmm.
So that ultimately impacts the day to day, that hits your bottom line, that overworks people because everybody's just doubling up on projects. It's super stressful. And with the movements that are being made just in society as a whole, everybody's focusing on work-life balance a little bit more. They're reprioritizing family and how they tackle work. So between these two items, it's become the forefront of how we're approaching the industry in terms of retention and recruitment.
Hmm. That's interesting. And from your perspective of kind of workforce development, what is it that sparked that interest for you? Because you sound like you've done BD work, like business development, you've done other types of work within construction. So what is it that kind of nudged you to go say, I really want to do workforce development? Is it still within construction field, right?
Yes, yes, I very specifically want to stay in the field because I absolutely love this industry. I love watching projects come to life from paper to what's physically in front of you. And I love the people. Like, as stressful as it might be, people in this industry are incredibly smart, hardworking, and honestly down to earth. And it just feels like home. But in terms of workforce development, I don't know why I felt so connected to it, but I think it stems from my habit of developing communities around me and building up my own networks and just being supportive. I've got a lot more, I guess, maternal instincts, if you will. I'm constantly looking out for other people and seeing what opportunities lie ahead. And maybe it even comes from the way I interacted with my dad growing up. He was constantly finding resources for me and
Hmm.
showing me different paths that I can take in my own career as I got older.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good. That probably is where it comes from because you've observed it and you kind of, you pick that up. So that's really, really cool. So talk to me a little bit about, I know we're in March now, but you kind of looking to do other things in the coming months or so. So talk to us a little bit about what's your aim moving forward. What are you focusing on?
I really want to hone in on supporting emerging construction professionals. I want to offer resume and interview workshops. I want to coach them through their career because when you step foot out of school and you go into the construction space, it is incredibly overwhelming. And you're like, okay, I've spent all this time staring at books, working on projects, I did internships, but this doesn't feel like enough.
Mm.
And there's aren't a lot of resources out there right now to fully boost that individual up. So I want to be a part of that solution and give them an opportunity to set the foundation for their career and give them a community that they can reach out to.
That's nice. And out of this community, are you, or not the community, but the kind of the profile of individual you're looking to work with? Is it going to be primarily focused on women? Is it going to be both that you're looking to target, or because emerging professionals can be both, but it sounds like more women are coming into the space. Are you going to have something for women as well?
So I would like it to be open regardless of gender. Right now, what I do find is that a lot more of the women and I connect and we bond over shared experiences. So right now, I see it just naturally flowing that way.
Right. So based on that, so it's nice that you're looking to close this gap that emerging professionals experience in construction. I think emerging professionals in general, like fresh students coming out of university, need help in all industries, but it's really important to also have an expert who spend time in construction, right? Somebody who like kind of knows ins and outs in the different departments that are out there and different pathways that one can take. But talk to me a little bit about what do you feel is, if we just talk about women for just a moment, what do you feel is the biggest challenge a lot of young women have going into construction?
A lot of young women going into construction feel like they aren't being respected or taken seriously, given enough opportunity. You name it, it's there. But I've also come to realize that some of those feelings the younger guys feel as well. So it becomes more of an age related issue where we have to work really hard to prove that we are capable. And I think what kind of clouds that um, is something that I can kind of share personally. I've got an experience with a superintendent who didn't really like me when I first started working on a particular project with him because he thought I was coming in with a very cocky attitude, a good, like that kind of mindset. But that wasn't because that's how I showed up. that was because in his experience, the younger men that he was used to working with tended to walk onto a job site cocky, like they knew everything. He also didn't go to college. So there's that stereotype that kind of eats at some people and rubs them the wrong way. So
Mm.
when they see a young person that has college experience, they look at you and go, "Ooh, you're going to come in here thinking you know everything. And you're going to try to run this and it's all going to fall apart. And I'm not going to give you anything because I don't want you to ruin it." So I had to take my time with him. I had to show him who I was, remind him that I know he's the boss, I know he's the expert, but that I also have experience under my belt doing this particular type of work, that I can still be of an assistance. I have a good sense of organization, and I can direct and interact with the subcontractors on site. Like, that doesn't intimidate me. And throughout the process of the summer, I just showed up as I was. I showed them that I was serious about my job, that I was willing to learn from as many people as possible to improve how I interacted on the job site. And by the end of the project, he was like, "I just want to take you to the next job that I do. Can I?"
That's great. I love it. That's a very practical advice for anybody starting off. So because I do agree, sometimes there's intimidation, and I think just because people in certain positions doesn't mean they're not intimidated by others, doesn't mean they're not biased, doesn't mean they're just dealing with humans. So building that relationship with them is super important.
Mhm.
And so I want to shift gears a little bit towards your entrepreneurship journey and kind of wanting to do this work with emerging professionals in construction. How long have you been thinking about doing this?
So honestly, it's been kind of in the back of my mind for a really long time. When I was at Virginia Tech, which is where I went to college, my friends and I started an organization called Building Women in Construction. And it's the idea that the women in architecture, construction, and engineering could come together, have their own community, but also reach out to industry professionals and grow their careers through different opportunities that way. So I really loved having that community and being a part of that process. So when I left school, I found myself burnt out and just in this weird headspace, craving a particular kind of community that I wasn't quite finding. So it just sat in the back of my head as I was like trying to navigate my first couple of years of in the industry. And and it kept coming back. And I was like, I'm not ready. Like, who am I to say that I can lead somebody else? Who am I to say I have a good understanding of the industry so that I can do that? But around 2019, I was actually talking to a friend over the summer, and her and I started bouncing ideas off of each other. And eventually, her and I parted ways on the particular topic of like working out something like Space to Build, because she realized she didn't have the time to commit to it. So I just couldn't let it go after that conversation. So I just kept thinking it over and decided that by the beginning of 2020, I would just launch something, right? Like, it didn't really matter. I just wanted to start the idea, get it out there, and I would just figure it out as I went along. So I launched the website in 2020. I pictured maybe I'll put together a blog, and then I remembered why I've never done that before and why that's not a good idea, because I couldn't keep up with it to save my life.
Hmm.
And then COVID hit. And
Mm.
then all of a sudden, you had people working from home, feeling really isolated on job sites, not being able to attend in person events, which is where a lot of our women in construction bonding happened, was in person. And I was just like, we all kind of need a space to rally around. Because we were in construction, we were considered essential workers, so we were still going into work every day. And I went, you know what? Let me take advantage of the fact that we have commutes, that people are interested in podcasts. And that's when I launched my podcast featuring women in the industry, so that even if you couldn't personally connect with somebody, you could still hear somebody's story and let it resonate with you, and then learn something from that conversation that you can apply to your job the next day.
Mm. And so what is it that now makes a good time to do this?
Um, Quite frankly, I'm ready to.
Well, I always
Uh,
ask this question because it's interesting because people are like, when is it the right time to do X, Y, and Z? And when and when I ask guests, it's like there's so many different answers. It's like there's no magic formula that's going to help you, figure out when you want to do something. So I'm always curious, why do people make decision like to do this now versus later or before?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to imposter syndrome for me.
Mm-hmm.
I just was so nervous and didn't give myself enough confidence and credit. And over the past few months, let me back it up a little bit. I have been doing this type of work
Mm-hmm.
for years, very naturally, just through the course of like making friends in the industry, meeting with students, yada yada. But I was just like, I couldn't I had a hard time giving myself permission to actually approach it more officially in terms of like a business structure.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing small things to build myself up to it, but I finally hit a wall recently, and I was thinking back to everything I've done in my career, and I'm like, why not? Why can't I, take this opportunity to shift into more of a construction career coaching and dig more into workforce development? Why am I denying myself the things that I'm interested in? I've done all this operational work. I hit those goals and I might pursue them later on in my career, but I can't stop coming back to this idea of workforce development. So I'm going to go in that direction.
Mm, that's super interesting, and it's there's a time and a place for everything, and what I often hear from entrepreneurs is that I just feel like it's time, and there's no specific metric to it, and of course sometimes we have to be ready for from different sides, whether it's financially, whether it's mindset wise, whether it's if we have all our ducks in a row. But sometimes it's just time, and you like, you just follow your gut, and you're like, I'm gonna just do this. So that's awesome. And so, what are some of the milestones you look forward to this year as you're kind of launching this officially?
Um, well, there's so many of them.
Give me top two.
Let's see. I think the thing I'm most excited about launching this year is an online resource library where emerging professionals don't have to come to me as an individual, but rather they have access to templates, glossaries, checklists, how-to guides, you name it, it's there. And like bonus episodes for the podcast and other opportunities that I felt like I needed when I was in that position. So I just want to make sure that I take into consideration that I am one person. There's only so much I can do. So the best way to handle that is to create as many resources and not marry myself to something that I can only do in person. So it's
Mm.
creating more opportunity for more people. And then it's also on top of that, it will be to go into coaching like on one-on-one basis. But I want to be able to run both simultaneously so that no one's waiting for me to become available to them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's almost creating like a system and a process where people can just access that support where it's in the middle of the night, that they're staying up and thinking about their career, right? Or how to kind of get into it, or just to have the resources. I think that's where it's at, and I love it that you're focusing on the construction because it's a very specific niche kind of area, and it is an area that, from what I understand, it's hard to find talent in any industry, but I think construction is probably one of the harder industries to kind of fill the talent. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I don't know the full statistics of how construction will actually match up to other industries. But if you just ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? You're not going to get construction worker unless maybe that kid's parents are in construction.
Yeah.
So it's more of a kind of a societal image, right? Like a
Mm,
lot of people don't understand the vast amount of opportunities to be successful in this industry. There are so many roles that are involved in construction that you don't see when you're driving by a job site, right? You're like, it's also a representation issue. So you drive by a job site, you're going to see usually men, and you usually see them doing the physical labor, which is fantastic and really, really cool to learn about. But then you've got the safety people, you've got the project managers, you've got people who aren't even on the job site on a daily basis. They're like risk managers, they do estimating. You've got inspectors who do hit the job site, but not necessarily every day, so they're not as easy to spot. And you've got really cool salary opportunities. People who graduate college, who go into construction and take on like some project management roles, in a couple of years, they're actually able to purchase their own houses, which I think is a lot more than what I think a lot of other industries are able to give their young emerging professionals.
Right. Yeah. And well, I think because the reward is higher because also that's a huge responsibility, right? To be a project manager of a construction site versus, I don't know, a small project in marketing, right? So the risk that you're putting, the risk part of it is higher, so the reward is higher. So that makes sense. Absolutely. And then from what it sounds like, there's this whole corporate side of construction management and just the industry that, I'm sure proposals and bidding and, all those people that win those projects so that people on site can actually be on site on these projects. I'm sure there's a lot of pre-work that happens as well that you can take advantage of.
And it's really an industry where I think anybody in this industry can find a place, or not in this industry, let me rephrase that. I think this industry is somewhere where you can find something that fits your personality, right? Like you mentioned proposals. We've got people who are in business development, who are in marketing, who tackle these items for us. We've got the number crunchers, the estimators, we've got accountants, we've got people who do insurance for us. So there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely. So people who are listening to this and are like, let me pass this along. Maybe I want to get into construction. Maybe they have a young colleague or a family member or friend who's maybe exploring opportunities. Where can they find you? Where they can connect with you? Where do you hang out at the most?
Right.
Social media wise, yeah.
Let's see. Well, if you just Google space to build, I normally pop up. You can see my website, which is constantly under construction. The podcast also goes by the same name, Space to Build. I'm on all major platforms, including things like Apple and Spotify. And then in terms of social media, you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn the most often. And again, it's at Space to Build, and you'll find me pretty much everywhere.
Sounds good. Well, Kathryn, thank you for coming on the show. I'll make sure to include all the links in the show notes so people can get in touch with you. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you so much for having me.